I got one. I just dropped the music. The beat's going. All right. So here we go.
Once cut you off.
So here we go. You cut everybody off.
All
right, the camera's cutting over. All right. Welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show. My name is Zach Adams. I pastor a church located just outside of Athens, Georgia. The name of the church is Calvary 316. I am joined in studio by the man that really needs no introduction, Dick Dastardly, who in this particular season will be known as the Scrooge of Christmas Present, Creighton Vaughn.
Hello. Christmas is a commercialized holiday that has nothing to do with Jesus. How are y'all doing?
There you go.
I feel very strongly about that.
I know you do. And you're the Scrooge of Christmas Present. That's going to be, in November and December, that's going to be your nickname, the Scrooge of Christmas Present.
I'm actually finding the Scrooge of Christmas always. Like I can all year round. Give me a platform. I'll speak evil things about Christmas.
All right. So the way that this show works, it's an unscripted Bible study. I have no idea what we're going to be talking about tonight. Creighton, as the producer, will be introducing a topic or a passage of scripture or a Bible character, something in that particular genre. And then it's my job to turn that topic into a Bible study. And I am joined in studio by a group of friends that help me do that by interacting, asking questions, sharing feedback, their thoughts. Joined in studio. We're going to work from left to right. Kyle, you've been out for a few weeks.
Yeah, I missed last week. Can I share the title with Creighton? Because I also very much dislike the Christmas season in general.
Oh, you want to share the title with?
Or come up with something for me.
We'll have to come up with something.
All right, we'll get.
So you're as anti-Christmas as.
Possibly more so. I limited it to 2 days before Christmas and no days after.
And no days after. Yeah. And that's an edict from on high.
Yep.
Like Millie, Killian,
it's contention in the household.
There's contention in the household. Okay, so you lose. That's what that means.
Well, outwardly.
Okay, outwardly, but you're standing defiantly internally.
Absolutely.
We're also joined.
On that hill.
We are also joined by Spice Daddy.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
who
Bah,
looks as
humbug.
though he ate Slim Shady tonight.
That as a one-time former mall Santa.
Ooh.
Story for
Nice.
another time.
No, that's not a story for another time.
I love.
You were a mall Santa.
At one time, yeah.
How is that? How does no one know that?
It's because I was the only fat white guy with a beard in the middle of Beijing, China.
Wait,
Oh,
you were a
boy.
mall Santa in China?
Beijing
is China. That's awesome.
And
So they
how-
really they all think not only is Santa Claus white with a beard,
right,
but the
right, right.
largest human being they've ever seen.
Pretty much. So they
So
got
like
me.
Santa Claus and the Yeti, it's kind of a combination of the two.
They asked me to do it, and I initially said no, but then they used the line, "Oh, it's for the orphans," which they were
Which
doing
are
it-
a lot of orphans in
they-
China.
and they were doing it for a charity for orphans. So I had to say yes.
So what did you have to do? Did you like ho
I-
ho ho?
I sat there and they took pictures with me.
Did you hear their like what they wanted for Christmas?
They
Freedom.
could have been at that moment. I'd only been in China for like maybe a year or so, so my Chinese was not great. So
You have no idea what they were
I had
asking.
no
a lot
idea
of
what they're
unhappy
saying.
homes that year.
but needless to say, I love Christmas, and to all my Filipino brothers and sisters out there who are celebrating the Burr months, where they start celebrating Christmas as soon as you start hitting Burr on the months.
Gucci.
Yeah, that's right.
That's
I'm with them. I'm with them.
I am not.
This show is just a waste of everybody's time.
No,
so,
it's not.
so we also have Deal Daddy Derek.
I enjoy being happy throughout the year, so I do also celebrate Christmas at the end of the year.
I know you're a pleasant person. Like pleasant people like to celebrate Christmas. Now I've been told you're going to be embarrassed. I'm going to bring this up. That you have like the greatest team name for your fantasy. league.
Oh, Daddy's Little Winners. We're gonna
Daddy's
win.
Little Winners.
Miami, Florida. Where you at? Daddy's Little Winners. Probably not gonna win. I was
Miami,
doing
Florida,
like 0
Nashville,
and 5.
Tennessee,
Yeah.
Lexington,
Tom
Kentucky.
Brady. Tampa Bay is Florida. Stand together. Represent.
Daddy's
Not from
Little
Florida.
Children.
What's
TM.
happening?
Daddy's
Yeah.
Little Winners.
Okay,
Team.
how's your team doing?
Great. I'm doing hold on, let's pull it up real quick.
No, we don't have to do that. We
No,
don't
we
have time for
are,
that.
and we're going
You just
to.
get
I'm
dead
doing it right
airspace now.
I'm talking the whole time. It's 3-7.
So
I'm
you're
doing
not
great.
doing very
I'm
well.
doing amazing.
That's
Bro. My
terrible,
losing
Derek.
record is great.
Daddy's
What I
Little
was
Losers.
going to say is I was 0-5, and I was like, well, I could keep a perfect losing streak, and then I just ended up lucking out this couple times. So
We're gonna take it a turn.
all
here.
my little winners have been doing great, so I don't know what to say.
Oh my goodness gracious! Well, we are joined in studio
You
by
brought it up.
a familiar face, a dear friend, Mr. Kenneth Snipes. How are you, my friend?
Doing all right, doing all right.
So,
Celebrating Christmas.
say what?
Celebrating Christmas.
Celebrating Christmas. See, a normal person for once in studio.
I mean this in the best way possible. As we'll talk about some tonight. Kenneth is not a normal person. Normal people don't do what Kenneth does.
Okay, well, I guess that's
So-
a
It
decent.
seems really normal to me.
Well, yeah,
It's cold out there today, man. You got to start Christmas when it gets cold.
Yeah, and it is cold. Well, let me just before we get into anything we're going to be doing today, I want you to just take a second, Kenny, and share with the audience kind of who you are, what you do. I know that this might feel like a repetition for me and maybe the guys in the room, but for someone that might not know you, that might be listening to this, whether it's on the podcast or watching here on the live stream, tell people about your organization, your mission, what you and your wife are doing, what your family's doing, and just kind of fill everybody in, bring everybody up to speed.
Cool. So I met Zach because my wife was in his youth group. So there's a little age difference between me and Zach.
I love Nikki to death, so
Yeah,
there's no debating that.
Yeah. So me and Nikki were in high school together, high school sweethearts, and we started going on mission trips in high school, and that's the history of it. That's how we got exposed to it, and we've been passionate about missions ever since. And
So maybe take
We got
one
married
step
in-
back. You do what for a living?
so we're missionaries.
So you're a missionary.
Yeah.
Let's start there.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll go real broad.
So we're full-time missionaries in Honduras. We
in
live
Honduras, that's
yeah.
the next location.
Yeah, there we go.
Where
so
in Honduras?
So we live in a town called Sihuatepeque.
God bless you.
Siwa. A little bit easier to say.
Siwa.
Right in the center of Honduras. It's actually the geographical center of the Americas.
wow.
So pretty cool. Fun.
That's a fun fact.
yeah, fun fact there.
We live in the center of the America. You're like the belly button.
The belly button of the America.
Where's
You should
your
make a
belly button?
T-shirt for your town.
We should do that.
We're the belly button of the America.
I don't even know how to translate belly button, but I'll have to work on
I'm
that.
sure you could just do a stick figure ring and put a dot.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
looking up.
So yeah, we live in the belly button of the Americas. Serving people down there. We're actually we strive to be missionaries to missionaries. So our first call down there is to go out and make contacts and network with the missionaries that are already on the field doing great things and partner with them on their projects.
Now it's been about a year or so. You were here last year. When was the last time you were with us?
Man, I was here.
Was it last year?
It had to have been 2020.
The end of 2020? Because
Yeah,
okay, so
2020, yeah.
we ended up having this conversation that you and your wife, you had done a lot of short-term mission trips. Since back in high school, you had a love for this area. You'd been to this area. You guys, it's kind of what brought you guys together. Of like, hey, we God has called both of us to this. And it was something that you guys identified with. And then you had done a bunch of short-term trips, had gone there for a little while at one point, had moved back, but it was nothing super permanent. And then that was the goal. That was the plan. So you started selling stuff, selling a house, getting finances, generating support. Coming up with a plan. That's when you and I sat at a Mexican restaurant and I got your pitch. This is what we're looking at doing.
Yeah.
And then you guys moved down there. You took this big step of faith. You had 2 little ones at the time.
Yep.
How old were they when you first left?
They would have been, Nikki's going to correct me, but I think they were 3 and 4.
Close enough, right?
Yeah.
When did you move to South America?
Central America.
Central America.
2020.
2020. But it was when in 2020?
It was 6 weeks before they shut everything
Exactly,
down.
right.
Oh,
Yeah,
jeez.
So you move, it's hard enough leaving family, leaving friends, moving to another culture. Jesus is calling you. You're on an adventure. The plan, and again, I don't want to get too far ahead of you, but
Yeah.
when you relocate to something like that, it's like, especially doing it the way that you did it, where you don't have some gigantic organization facilitating the move. There are various like big, missions organizations associated with large denominations where they'll vet people. And I mean, you go down there, but they've got everything set up for you.
Yeah.
That was not your situation. You guys are like, we're freelancing this.
Yeah.
It's taking a step of faith, and then the world shuts down.
Absolutely.
And so you're like finding a house, like you're totally
we
disoriented.
got moved in like a week or so before they shut everything down. And then we didn't even have time to buy furniture. We bought 3 beds and a TV that was free with the beds, I think, if I remember right.
It's a good deal.
Yeah. Great. It was like a 30-inch flat screen. Huge,
Massive.
Yeah. And like we didn't have a couch. We didn't have any living room furniture. We didn't have a kitchen table. And like nothing opened up till well into the fall of 2020. So we just had the floor.
You hunkered down for.
Jeez.
Like me and Jack sat down on the tile floor and watched the Braves.
What was that like to again, that move had to have been exciting. This is a venture of faith. You guys are geeked up about, Lord, what doors are you going to open? How are you going to use us? What opportunities are there? You get there, you're starting to have fun, getting settled in. Like there's so much excitement, adrenaline, faith, and then everything screeches to a halt and you're basically locked down.
Yeah. And it's not even basically lockdown. We
Like,
were
y'all were
completely locked down.
Hardcore
Like,
lockdown.
Not allowed to leave your house unless it was your day of the week to leave. You could leave your house every 10 days depending on your
to
ID
get
number.
food and whatnot,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Now, how did that? That had to have been a very depressing. Like, oh my goodness, what are we doing,
Oh yeah, it
Lord?
was- if anything caused me to begin to doubt our decision, it was that. I mean,
for sure.
we were locked in this house. It didn't have any furniture, and we had people that we had told all these great, we told this great vision to, these great ideas that we were going to be, helping all these people in Honduras, and then we were locked in our house.
It's like you
And-
pray for open doors, and the Lord not just shuts them, but locks them from the outside.
Yeah, and a lot of missionaries left the field during that year. I mean, a
I
lot
know.
of our contacts that we knew down there, people that we had built relationship with over the past, whatever it is, 15 years working down there, decided that was their call to pack up and come back home.
Now you guys stuck it out. You hunkered down. you kept faith, Lord. You're in control, and this is part of this process. Took advantage of the time, worked on learning Spanish. The kids with school. I mean, you had plenty to do still, and ministering to the people that were directly around you. I know you had a lot of creative ways of just still being used during the pandemic. I want to fast forward way beyond that, because more of that story, I encourage you to go back, Creighton. You might be able to find the last episode that we had Kenny on, and then we can post a link so that there's a lot more to this story that we've already recorded. But you guys are now in a season where the pandemic's kind of behind everyone.
Almost.
It's
actually there's still a mask mandate in Honduras.
Is there really?
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
But by and large,
But mostly, yeah.
Things are like you're able to now get out there and start doing the things that you felt called to. And in private conversations that you and I've had, I think what's been really neat and what I've really admired about the way that you guys have done missions, and this is a shameless plug, but I mean this, I think a lot of times there's such a pretentiousness to missionaries of like, okay, I love this culture. I love this people. I'm going to go there and be their savior. I'm going to tell them how to do church. I'm going to tell them how to run their lives. I'm going to tell them that I'm going to go down and make their thing better.
More American
Often is how that ends up translating. You guys took a much, I think, humbler approach in the sense of like, we do love this culture. We do love this area. We do feel called to serve these people. But instead of like going down with this like really hard line plan, the book we're going to go by, we're going to go and more of just try to get into the community, learn the people. You might think you know the culture by visiting, but it's different when you're living on the block.
Yep.
And you're rubbing shoulders with people and you're buying groceries and you're going to school. And like, let's go and let's spend some time actually immersing ourselves in this community. And then in that process, we begin to learn and see what needs are really there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that that's such a cool thing about what you guys are doing. Now, I'm going to set that up by asking two questions. What things did you think maybe going down, hey, we're going to definitely do this, but now that you've been down there, you're like, I don't think we'll actually do that. On the flip side, now that you've been in the culture for so long, how's the Lord leading and guiding you? And how is this like, what are the needs that you're seeing? How is that shaping your ministry?
So when Nikki and I moved down there the first time, we did such a bad job of being missionaries. We really tried not to have, goals and ideas of what we wanted to do, because it had been 6 years, almost 6 years since we had lived in Honduras. And we didn't really set a whole lot of goals. When we sat down with our potential donors, they asked what we were going to do. We said we really don't know. The one thing we knew we wanted to do was network with other missionaries.
And God called you.
Yeah, and God was calling us to do this. And it was and we told people it was one step at a time. We said God's calling us to Honduras. We're not sure what He's going to have us do, what He's going to have for us when we get there, but that's what we did. So we moved down there.
What have you been doing now? Like, how is being in the culture? How has that shaped what you're actually doing?
So now,
or what you're planning to do, what you're looking to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So we spent the last 3 years building relationships, getting to know people, and both Hondurans, local folks, and then missionaries that were already on the field. And we have some pretty big plans for this coming up here. We want to start a missionary co-working. What do we call it? Missionary co-working,
like a co-op type of a thing,
where
collective,
a collective. Yeah. So there's a Spanish institute in our town that between 150 and 300 missionaries a year come to learn Spanish. And a lot of those people are going to be in Honduras permanently. A lot of people are going to move on to different Latin American countries, but they're just stopping by to learn the language. And we see a huge opportunity to reach out to those folks, because we know what it feels like to be transitioning missionaries in the worst times. Transitioning our family from life here in the States, normal life to transitioning to the mission field. And so we want to open up this co-working space. That's what we're calling it, co-working space, where missionaries can come in. They have access to high-speed internet. They can come in, work on their Spanish homework, work on their newsletters, have, video meetings with their supporters back in the States. Because a lot of times when they come down here, they don't have access to internet. They don't have a really nice apartment where they can sit down and work. We want to have a playground where they have a safe place for their kids to come, because
Safety is a big thing.
Safety is a big thing. I mean, especially like now, I mean, I'll take my kids anywhere, but when we first moved down there, we were super, careful and
Well, you take your kids
concerned.
anywhere now because you know where not to take them.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. But when we first moved down there, like it was months before my kids saw a playground, and a long time, several months before my kids saw a playground. So we want to offer a space for missionaries to be able to come down that are going to the Spanish Institute, or missionaries that are already in our town and established, to just be able to come out and let their guard down a little bit, relax, have a cup of coffee, let their kid play on the playground, and
network,
use Wi-Fi.
encourage one another, make
Exactly.
connections.
And then we're also starting some missionary finance training. I'm a Dave Ramsey fanatic, so my wife and I have been debt free since high school, and we want to encourage other people to have that same mindset. A lot of the missionaries that are down there right now in our town are in a lot of debt, and that's just not a good place to serve from. So
Right.
we're going to offer some classes, some finance classes, some orientation classes, and then like simple stuff like when moms come to town, Nikki invites them over to the house to have a mom and kids play group. She's done a ton of work, like taking people to the grocery store, showed them around town, showed them how to get a bank account, just things like that even even the folks that come with a really organized organization, like you were talking about earlier, they still don't get that help. They still don't get those things. And so I'd really like to transition missionaries onto the field a little easier, make it less of a struggle, because they already had to leave their home. They already had to leave their comforts of the States to come down to Honduras, and they're in it. A lot of them are in a transitional period. So let's make that as easy as we can. Make it as smooth and pain free as possible.
So I'm going to say something that I don't mean this, and God, I crack jokes from time to time, but God honest, this is not a joke. This is a legitimate statement. I think
I'm getting nervous now.
I know, so am I. I got to figure out how to say this without getting in trouble. A lot of Americans, our perception of like Hondurans or Salvadorans or whatnot is that they are, especially because of our exposure to them, we have a belief that they like come pre-made with certain gifts and abilities, like that they're really good at carpentry, they're great at sheetrock, they're really good at
Soccer.
paint, soccer. But no, like I'm just saying, like
Soccer's the truth. That's actually real.
but what we don't often realize is that immigrants that get to America don't come very equipped and able. They just want to work. Like they learn their skill and craft often here in America. They don't come with the skill. I guess that's the right way to say it. They don't come with the skill.
I'll give you an example of somebody. I know a guy, his name's Mario. He lives not too far from here. And he came in 1998 after basically completing pharmacy school in Honduras to become a pharmacist. And Hurricane Mitch hit in 1998, like wiped out a ton of Honduras, and he just didn't see any hope in the country. And so he crossed the border into the States. Basically, I mean, he lacked, I believe it was months of having his degree in pharmaceutical, whatever, being a pharmacist. And he came here and started painting houses.
Right. He learned a trade.
Yeah. And
just to make a living.
Yeah. Just to make ends meet.
Now, yeah. I say that because, we have this idea that like, hey, American kids are really lazy. But the South American, Central American kids are not,
no.
But you've found that one of the needs within that community is to act like there's not as many artisans and craftsmen, tradespeople in that area.
Yeah.
Like we think, well, like everybody can do everything.
So that's actually the second goal that we have for next year.
I know that was a setup. That was
there you go. I like that.
I was setting you up.
You did that really well. It was smooth.
I'm a professional.
Nothing about that was smooth.
You've been man of the people, Creighton.
You've been doing this radio show for a while, right?
For a while.
Yeah. So going into that, along with that, in that same facility that we want to have the missionary co-working space, we want to have an after school program for high school students. And the goal in that is to expose them to different trades and things that they could be involved in, and something they can become passionate about. Most kids in our town have two dreams. One is to become the next Cristiano Ronaldo, famous soccer player. for those of you who only watch American football.
Famous soccer player who's washed up and is alienated Manchester United.
Yeah, yeah.
Ooh, drop some soccer knowledge.
There you go. Bam. So a lot of guys want to they want to be a famous soccer player, which we know here in the States. I mean, there's tons of kids that want to be a famous baseball player.
Yeah, my kids are convinced they'll both be Braves players.
Yeah, and there's very high percentage that's not happening.
Not going to happen.
So as good as Zach's kids are at playing,
probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
I say probably. Strong chance.
Yeah.
Theo has a better chance of managing or being the general manager of the Atlanta Braves and actually playing for the Braves. Quincy, landscaping.
There you go. There you go. And he's white.
God.
So
hey, you get a degree to landscape on that turf.
So, there's that. And then the other thing the other vision, the other dream that these kids have, if you can even call it that, is to come to the States and do something here, whether it's wash dishes or paint houses or, whatever kind of work they can get. If you ask
opportunities,
them, if you ask these kids, what do you want to do when you get to the States? Because the answer, when you ask, what do you want to do? Like, I'm going to go to the States. Well, what do you want to do when you get there? Work. I mean, that's it. Whatever they come across. If it is wash dishes for cash, under the table, that's what it'll be. If it's paint houses, that's great. If it's, run handyman business, whatever it is, that's what they want to do because they know that there's more opportunity here. Of course, nobody tells them the cost of living here in comparison to the cost of living where they're
and
at.
so you got all these kids though. Yeah. These are the two dreams. And so what are you're wanting now that you've been there and you're seeing like, there's not mentorship. There's not training. There's not one-on-one discipleship in that regard. And so the plan here is to kind of move with that, right?
What we want to do is we want to pick these kids up before they drop out of high school or finish high school. We want to grab them in that, that's kind of a vital time.
That sweet spot.
And pick them up from school, bring them over to the workshop, bring them over to the facility and basically spend, the school year, weeks at the time, exposing them to different trades, exposing them to carpentry, exposing them to barbers, like the best barber in town, come in and give free haircuts to all the kids, teach them, what he does, how he makes a living, plumbers, coding, people that are doing coding, because that's a really big thing now.
Electrical, fill in the blank.
Any sort of trade, we want to expose them to that and then pay attention to each kid individually and see what sparks an interest and then do what we can to propel them forward, whether it's with an apprenticeship or trade school or whatever it may be, to get them into a career that they can be sustainable, and then teach them the entrepreneurial skills like customer service and budgeting to help them succeed in that business. Yeah. And then also teach them that, look, I mean, Honduras for now is still a capitalist nation. So if you could be the best plumber in town, people are going to call you and you're going to make more money than everybody else. It's it's the way capitalism works. It doesn't matter if it's Honduras or the United States.
And going to America doesn't have to be the dream.
Yeah.
You can make your dream where you are.
Yeah. And the goal is to have Hondurans that have chosen to be successful in that environment come in and teach these classes. It's not going to be me, the American guy who was privileged and born in the States. It's going to be, I'm going to seek out
facilitate it.
I'm going to seek out Hondurans that have chosen to make life happen there. And the thing we really want to teach the kids is, look, as long as the best Hondurans keep leaving and going to the States, there's no chance of Honduras getting any better because the government's not going to fix the country. It's got to be the citizens, the people who live there.
How can people learn more about your organization or get in touch with you if they might even want to support?
Yeah. I love to talk if you can't tell. So the best way is just to reach out to us directly. We're on Facebook, Instagram. Bridges Across the Mission Field is the name of our ministry.
Is there a website or a Facebook page? What's is it an easy link that we can give Creighton you can put on the thread or something?
Yeah. I can send you guys the link, but the Facebook is just Bridges Across the Mission Field. It's easy to find.
Great.
It's a mouthful and it's the only ministry on Facebook or the only page on Facebook called with that name.
Okay. So it's easy to find.
Yeah. It's super easy to find. And then, you can reach out to me and Nikki directly. And
you're going to be in the States for another couple of weeks too. So
a few more days. Yeah.
A few more days. Guys, before we transition to the topic for tonight, I wanted to give Kenny an opportunity to share. Y'all have any questions for him about missions work, about what they're doing? You guys have anything?
The local church there, I know there's a lot of missionary stuff, but like always viewed traveling not to go in and try and change the church. God already established a church there.
Yeah.
How do you work with the local church?
So
there,
when we
if
got
there is
there,
one.
6 weeks after we got there, all the local churches closed down because the country forced them to.
Mm.
And we didn't have a home church. So the first church that opened back up actually was called Esperanza Viva, which is like Hope Lives, I think is the translation. And we heard they had opened up, contrary to what the government was allowing. And so we showed up and went to visit them. And it's been really great. We've had a lot of opportunity to partner with them. They're very active in the community. It's grown exponentially just since 2020. But the majority of the church in Honduras is Catholic.
Mhm.
So the evangelical movement is much smaller than the Catholic movement. There's a ton of generational Catholics in the country. So that's the status of the church right now.
D, Kyle,
Interesting.
anything?
God bless you, man. That's not my calling.
Yeah, just come down and hang out. Though, at least.
Seriously.
That would be cool.
Yeah, you guys come down and hang out for a while. It'd be pretty cool to let you see what's going on.
Creighton,
That would
any
be
question
cool.
for Kenny, or you want to drop a topic?
I can drop a topic. I would like to second Kyle. I'm so glad that we have people like you in the world because boy, do I like America.
Yeah, yeah.
And I would like
Amen.
to.
Absolutely.
I am a homebody.
I'll come visit.
Come on.
Yeah. Justin's a traveler. I am not. Well, since we have a missionary, a former missionary, possibly a missionary again.
I was an English teacher, never did missionary work anywhere.
Right.
You love Jesus and you taught English, right?
Yes.
But
And-
he's winking because he
and
was in communist
sometimes
China.
I would
Yeah.
use an ancient 66 books to teach English with.
Right,
Oh, there
right,
you go,
right.
there you go, yeah.
That was a slip of my part. That reminds me of the days of using GChat and having to talk in code to you.
Talking
Yeah.
code.
But
Topic,
since we have
so-
missionaries, yes.
Okay.
My question is, where does the profession / calling of missionary come from? Like, I don't think that missionary is a title we see in the Bible. Like, we know that Paul went on missions. Jesus sent the apostles a couple of times, like into the field around them, and you could kind of call those missions. But I'm talking specifically like this idea of wonderful people who are, for the most part, lifers. Like missionaries are lifers a lot of the time. Where did that come from? It's a very big thing in a lot of churches, especially like I spent my time in college with a bunch of Baptists, and missions was a big thing. We talk about missions all the time. Where does this idea of it being a profession and a like this self-contained thing come from, as opposed to just being a subset of evangelism?
That's a great.
Do you understand where I'm coming from?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you and I've had similar conversations about this topic
Yes.
in the past. Missions is a very interesting concept, interesting topic. And I'm going to probably say some things that's going to really upset some individuals. Kenny, you're going to need to hear me all the way through
Okay.
to the end.
I'm down.
Before you get up and storm out. First, let's start with like the Old Testament. The Old Testament, there is absolutely. Wait, before we even get there, if you are watching the live stream and you'd like to join the conversation, if you'd like to ask questions related to what we're talking tonight, if you have a question about Kenny and his ministry, we have 2 threads on both the YouTube channel as well as the Facebook page. Under the video, you can leave a comment. Creighton, you are monitoring those, correct?
Indeed.
And so if somebody drops a note, you will bring that into the show if it's applicable, correct?
Yes.
So, and you're also putting the topic on. So if someone's just joining us now, we're talking about missions. We've got a good friend of ours, Kenny Snipes, is in studio with us. He's a missionary in Honduras. Him and his wife, good friends of ours. And so we're talking about missions tonight. And so before I dive into the topic, felt like we need to do a better job of repeating what we're discussing for those either listening on the podcast or watching live. So again, if you're watching live, drop a note, let us know you're with us, and ask a question, join the conversation. You guys as well with the topic at any moment. You guys want to jump in, flag me down, and your thoughts are always appreciated. Regarding the Old Testament, we have this very interesting setup in regards to God and His plan for the world. So we're going to really kind of try to unpack this very macro and work down to the micro. You get to God's calling of Abraham. And there's a whole lot of history, a whole lot of stuff happens before that. God dealing with the world, his plans to provide a savior, That all gets established following the fall and a prophecy given to Eve that it would be through the seed of the woman that God would provide a savior that would crush Satan's head, even though Satan would bruise his heel. So there was always this prophetic messianic promise of God providing a savior through humanity, that God would become flesh, that idea of the incarnation. The question would be like, how would that manifest? How would that work itself out? And the early story, first several chapters of Genesis, is fairly chaotic, even to the point that knowing this dynamic, we're given an interesting perspective into the satanic strategy of this. First, boy one kills boy two, Cain kills Abel. Again, this idea of the attack of humanity. But then you have the sons of God coming into the daughters of men. You have this corroding corruption of the genetic gene pool. It's a total mess, total disaster. God calls out Noah, who was righteous, his sons, their wives. He destroys the earth with a flood. He starts over. And he tells everybody, spread out. Multiply, fill the earth, spread out. What does humanity immediately do? The opposite. They congregate. It's called the Tower of Babel. Again, bad move. A next rebellion against the wishes of God. They build a tower. They tar it so it's waterproof. You think they're sending a signal. We don't need you, God. We don't want God. And so God confuses the languages and forcibly scatters them. And in the midst of all of that, we're given then, I think it's chapter 11, this genealogy. And then that genealogy leads us to this man, Abraham. And then it's through Abraham now that God is going to work this plan of redemption. So instead of kind of like trying to deal with all of humanity, God's like, forget this. He sends them all across the earth. And he's like, this guy, I'm going to call him out of the world and I'm going to do a work through him and his family. And so we have the Abrahamic covenant. We have this calling of Abraham, and that gets passed down to the son of promise, Isaac. And it's not Esau, the firstborn, but it's Jacob, the heel catcher. And then, he has his 12 sons. And so God, the children of Israel, the nation of Israel, God is working this plan. They go from a family to a nation in Egypt. They get called out of Egypt back to the land of promise. He's going to make them a nation. Again, he's going to use this nation to be a light and example into the world. He's going to work his plan to save the world through this group of people. So there's this big macro picture, all this stuff happening. Again, we're in the book of Exodus at this point, Leviticus. They get to Sinai. God is giving them all of these instructions in which to make them distinct and unique and to keep them separate and preserved. The whole plan, God, he calls out a family, makes them a nation, puts them into a very particular piece of land, real estate. He organizes the land. Now we're into numbers. Each of these families have different plots. They all have different roles. They all have different jobs. In the center of the camp, God dwells. He has them build this tabernacle, this tent. Later, it'll be the temple. He dwells in the midst. So God is in the midst of this land, this people, this family, this nation, this people group. And they're all called out to be a light into the world. Now, in the Old Covenant, that Old Testament model, there is no concept of missions whatsoever. In fact, God to his people is quite like the anti-mission and the way that we perceive missions. It was, don't go into the world. In fact, it was like, don't leave the land. Mm-hmm. And don't interact with any of the people. Stay separate, stay holy. Now, there was an open invitation. If the world wanted to know the life that God had for them, look no further than the Hebrew people. That was their job. They were to be a city up on a hill. They were to be the example of the life that God had for all of humanity. That's why they were to be different. That's why they were to be distinct. That's why they had all these unique characteristics, because the world, if they wanted to know what kind of life God had for them, they were to find it in the Hebrew people. Now, this wasn't to be a killjoy. I mean, think about like some of the unique things that God did within this people group to articulate to the world like what he really wanted for life. Like take the idea of the Sabbath is a completely foreign notion to any other world culture. And yet God wanted his people to work 6 days and take a whole day off. All the other nations are working. And yet the Hebrew people are doing nothing. They're doing nothing. They're hanging out. And then like they would work 6 years, and then the 7th year, they take the whole year off. Imagine if there was a country on the planet that had that particular model. Where it was like, let's say Mexico. Mexico's like, you know what? From this point forward, we're gonna trust God. We're gonna work 6 years. 7th year, total vacation. It would be the envy of the world. Like it would be very noticeable, right? And then if you have this idea, this concept of like the year of Jubilee, where it's like, hey, you incur debt and you lose land and this and that, but you know the 50th year, all debts are wiped clean. You know. Like there were all these characteristics that God instilled in the Hebrew people to be a beacon into the world that he had a better way to live. It wasn't to restrict, like all the particular restrictions on sex. It wasn't to limit the enjoyment of sex. It was to preserve the enjoyment of sex. It was like you had all these hedonistic cultures around that were killing themselves with STDs, and God had this very unique plan. Like, you can have a lot of fun with this, but here's some safeguards. And so if the world wanted to know how God designed life to be, you were to look at the nation of Israel. And if you wanted to encounter God, well, it was very simple. Everyone was free to come. There were no limitations. Anyone, any Jew or Gentile, they were free to come into the land and go to the temple. And then there was a structure by which anyone could encounter God, by which anybody could interact with God. It was a beautiful thing, an amazing thing. And you have examples in the Old Testament of people taking advantage of this, from Ruth, who was a Moabite, to Rahab, the harlot of Jericho, to the Queen Sheba, who hears of all that's going on. She travels up to see it. And so you had this idea of like, if you wanted to encounter God, you had to come to a physical place, an actual location, and you could do so. Well, what ends up happening is that all of this is symbolism of God's ultimate plan, of the ultimate strategy. So we get to the new covenant. And then the new covenant, is there a temple? You say no, Creighton. You're shaking your head no. There's not a temple.
Not a physical one.
I didn't ask you that. I said, is there a temple?
Well, then I guess you could Jesus calls himself the temple.
Okay, but we're also called temples of the living God, right? And the temple, in its most simplistic definition, is the dwelling place of God, which is why the physical human temple and the tabernacle before was all modeled after what? The throne room of heaven. It's where God dwelt on earth. That was a physical place. But today there's no longer a need for a physical place, not because there's not a need for a temple, but because now the temple not being a physical location, but being actual people who have been filled with the presence of God. And so instead of like soliciting the world to come to a physical place, God fills the hearts of his followers and does what? He now sends them into the world so that you don't have to come someplace to encounter God. God is brought to the people to be encountered wherever you are in whatever culture. And thus you get the Great Commission where instead of coming to one place, I'm going to fill my people with my presence and I'm going to send you into the world. It's a beautiful thing. It's an awesome thing. It's a complete flipping, all rooted in the same ideas, but a complete flipping of it. Now, again, the Great Commission is given to Christians. The Great Commission is not given to the church. The church was commissioned, established, formed by Jesus as his body, his bride, his body. And thus, it's the church's job to minister to Christians, to equip Christians to go and fulfill the Great Commission. You don't have any type of defined role of missionary within the New Testament concept. You don't have the idea of like, okay, Paul was a missionary, but he was an apostle. Like that was his actually like church title was apostle. Paul didn't call himself a missionary in that sense. Timothy, Titus, they were missionaries. They traveled with Paul, but they were pastors. Pauline epistles, the pastoral epistles, written to those men. Peter, an apostle. You have apostles, you have prophets, you have very distinct roles that are to be filled within the church. There's not a role defined as missionary within the New Testament. And so the first part of the answer is there isn't anything. And to some extent, I think we've done a disservice by creating one. Like by saying
Agreed.
by saying, hey, we're Christians and we're deacons and we're elders and we're lay people and we have missionaries here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the missionaries that go and do that stuff. And we go and do this stuff. And I think that that's a problem because that's not a biblical distinction. That's a made up one. I will also say that part of the problem and the development of missionary societies is that individuals stop fulfilling that clarion call of the Great Commission. And so the church then started to organize and we need to reach these places, so let's raise up people. And a lot of times those people just really want to travel and just see parts of the world than actually, again, there's not a role called missionary. Here's why there isn't. Everyone is called to be a missionary. I mean that's the distinction. Like, if you understand the God's blueprint of evangelism, it's that every single person that he died, redeemed, saved, and they've given their life to him, they're on a mission. Now, what the mission is up to them in Jesus. Because you didn't give your life to a church, you didn't give your life to a pastor, you gave your life to a Christ, a Savior. His name is Jesus. And in giving your life to him, he now is the one as Lord that has the authority to dictate your mission. Am I a missionary? Absolutely, I guess in a sense. My mission field is Winder, Georgia, and the outlying areas. That's where God has called me to. And Creighton, your mission. Your mission is to the field in which you're in, or where God has called you to. Like, we are each just as much of a missionary wherever we are as Kenny and Nikki are in a foreign country. The only difference is that their mission is somewhere different. It's somewhere foreign. But that doesn't mean that Kenny's any more of a missionary than Derek. Now, as a church, we will classify them differently. Well, Derek's a layman at a local church, and Kenny's the missionary. No. They're both missionaries because there isn't a distinction in the scriptures. We're all missionaries.
Or we're just both believers.
You're both believers on mission.
Yeah.
On mission. But I do think that the distinction that's made is so many people don't understand that they're on a mission. Like we don't step up, we don't see ourselves in this context because we we minimize what we're actually to be doing right now.
I think a lot of the confusion comes from, you keep saying like missionary, like, you've got a mission. Everybody who is a Christian has been given that mission. The Great Commission is to go out and to spread the gospel. I think the confusion comes where people start to kind of assume or think that being a missionary is one of the gifts. Like, some people have the gift of the spirit of missionary. That's not a thing that's defined. There are evangelists, but that can be done within your local community. There are missionaries
or in Honduras,
there are missionaries who are pastor teachers. There are missionaries who are doing whatever the gifts of the spirit are. Missionary is not a gift of the spirit. We are all missionaries. Use your gift in your mission field.
I can tell you one thing that is a gift, though: being able to immerse yourself in another culture and being able to live there. because it's difficult. Most people cannot move to another country.
Oh, I totally
Cannot
agree.
move-
I couldn't.
cannot
Wait a second.
involve.
I
another
moved
culture.
from Metro Atlanta to Winder,
Well, hold on.
No,
and
you
I had to
didn't.
and I had to
Yeah, but it
adapt.
wasn't a
That's
new
offensive.
language.
But
You
what-
did
what-
have to
hold on.
adapt.
Okay,
Hold on.
moving
Wait,
to Winder
wait.
takes a special calling too.
It
It does, man.
But I don't think
You
I,
lived in Snellville. You didn't move from Metro Atlanta.
That is a lot different.
I don't-
than-
I
I
don't
went
think-
from
Oh,
wearing
yeah.
Royal Elastics and skinny jeans to Wranglers and boots.
That was your choice.
and I, over
It
the
was a
years,
good choice.
over the years, I've done short term stuff and stuff like that, and all the missionaries, quote unquote, missionaries that were there, full time missionaries that were successful, were the ones that didn't try and make their little America.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Absolutely.
In
Well,
that
that's
country.
a
They got
use of the
involved.
skills that God gives you. That's
Right,
not
and I think
necessarily
that's a calling.
yeah.
And that's kind of why I was pointing out too, that not necessarily that I wasn't doing missionary-ish work in China, is I went there to be an English teacher. I was not there for the intent of doing stuff that I was there. It was just a byproduct of me being involved with the church
that
there.
became your mission
Be-
field
be-
because that's where you
because
were.
that's where I was.
So
I was a Christian.
But
that
see,
got
that's what
involved
makes a
with the
real
church.
missionary.
Right. And I
Yeah.
think in the US, because I would come back every year or so and they're like, oh, I heard you're a missionary in China. I'm like, no, I'm an English teacher. Like I am there. I'm getting paid to teach English. I just happen to work with the church because that's what God tells you to do. I get involved in the church. I do stuff that same things you're called to do.
Well, it's kind of like it's like tithing. Like people think that tithing is like some great thing that they do, and really that's just the bare minimum.
Right.
Being a
Mhm.
missionary is the bare minimum.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Be a mission
Being
to your field.
mission-minded, being
Yep.
wherever your community is, like you said,
Right.
you became a missionary because you're in China, because
Right.
you were in China.
I was
Not
there.
because God told you to go to China and tell people about Jesus.
Right. Now, did it happen to be super illegal for the stuff I was doing? Yes.
Yeah.
but I'd much rather face that than a God who's called me to be involved with
Yeah.
the church. And
The
You
same
see-
could be said the other way too. I mean, like, what about for me? So, like, I'm specifically called to be a pastor where I'm at. If I had this like haunting feeling, like, well, you know what, I'm going to go back to Honduras with you. Like, that would not. I wouldn't be serving the calling that has been given to me, the mission field that I've been given at that point. So everybody's got their own specific. They got their mission field. Use your gifts there.
right. And I think
So-
God creates you with talents and personality to be able to handle different cultures. Most people, yeah, they can do these short 1 week, 2 week things where they go and do some you know,
building or
building or
Get some
you know,
sweet
which is
Instagram shots.
yeah, which is great. You know,
Yeah.
you maybe go take a mission trip to Hawaii kind of thing.
Voluntourism.
Yeah, and which there's no problem because sometimes with as much of these churches, which I kind of hate, but sometimes those are the kind of trips that actually grasp the people that are really called.
That's the one that
That's
got me.
how. That's my story. I mean,
Right.
that's how I got there. I went on a mission trip because it was a week away from my parents.
So the first mission trip I ever went to was to Honduras a long time ago, and I didn't like it because I went with the church, and they kept us so safe that I was like, I'm never going with the church again. So the next time I went somewhere, it was just me and a buddy that went to go stay with another guy that was going to live in another country for a couple.
So when I was a youth pastor, we would take 40 high school students to Rosarito, Mexico. Yeah.
That's me.
Yeah. We'd fly to Los Angeles, Atlanta to LAX and rent like 10 town and country vans and drive down through San Diego, Tijuana, all the way down
that's
Baja.
crazy.
I did it twice.
Yeah, no, I did it.
You were like 25.
I did it like 6 or 7
That
times.
sounds really responsible.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's amazing that parents actually sent their kids with me.
Or the parents that went with you.
It was, yeah, your mother-in-law went.
Yeah.
That's right.
But,
oh my gosh, yeah, that's
But but what's funny, so we take those trips, and it's like the goal of the trip had nothing to do with anything in Rosarito. Like, it wasn't about bettering the Mexican community around the facility that we were at. And like, we go do an outreach, and it wasn't about reaching out to anyone. Like, we didn't tell the kids that, but the whole goal of us taking them was to expose them. It was really about our kids, giving them an experience in a different culture, in a different environment outside of their comfort zone, to teach them things about themselves. Now, did we want to do good and be a blessing, et cetera? Sure. But that wasn't, you're going to be there for a week. It's a bunch of teenagers. I always felt bad, whatever construction project we did, because it was like someone was going to have to come by afterwards, and fix it. It's like, do you really want, 8 high school guys building you a roof? No, probably not. And so, but it was an experience because you're wanting to teach and instill this missions mentality. And a lot of people, like all those kids that came back, some of them really were like, hey, I'm going to go on the mission field. Like, I want to go out. Like, I really enjoyed doing that. That was, but you can do the same thing, whether it's the inner city or whether it's your city or your neighborhood, your town. The idea here is that there
Or
isn't
after
a class.
natural disasters. Because I know lots of people that do that after hurricanes and Florida.
Exactly. But again, I want to try to get out of the idea of seeing a missionary as a title and it being more of the calling. And that calling is universal. We all are a missionary to whatever world God has called us to reach. I guess the question for the audience is like, sometimes it's easy. Like, we like to throw money at a missionary and pump up the missionary, have the missionary come in and like support the missionary at the expense. Right. Yeah. But we do that at the expense of our own mission.
So, earlier you said that we did a disservice to missions in the way that we currently do it. To go back to that, are you clarifying it to say that you don't mean that the way that we have like big M missionaries isn't a disservice to them, but we're doing a disservice to ourselves in that we are infantilizing ourselves in a certain way.
You see,
like,
I think
we don't do missions in our own life because we think, oh no, there are these missionaries out there and they're doing that, so I don't have to. What
Like
you meant when you said the disservice line?
I think that's absolutely applicable.
Okay.
I will add to that, though, that I think one of the other components of what we do as a big disservice is the big missionary stuff. It's the big organizations, the big missions funding. We've made it a career path in like this very unique way. Like we've made it. See, the right way to say it. We've made it like an apart, like a set aside apart style like ministry. Like the church does this and the missions people do this.
Yeah.
And the church supports the missions people.
They literally call it a missions field. It's separate from
It's
whatever you're
separate.
doing here.
As opposed to it being like, and I think that gets fostered by like having third-party mission organizations that denominations underwrite, who then recruit missionaries to go do this, because it all ends up being about numbers then and about filling data sheets and feeling great about it.
And I think with those, you often get missionaries that were never called to be missionaries.
It becomes
Absolutely.
a career path.
It's a career path. And I've met people like that and they were miserable.
Yeah.
Well, even not even career path. Like, I can think of instances where, you build up the idea of the missionary enough and you start to think like, well, gosh, I haven't really done anything for God in a while. There's an opportunity to go to, Mexico for a week. I can get some, buy up some time,
God points.
get a little bit of God work in, and then, be
Right.
good until the next one comes around next year.
Now, let me kind of add one little caveat though of what does make it a little distinct and a little different, and something we have to be sensitive to. So if like, let's say Kyle, you felt called, like, hey, there's a group of people, they don't have a pastor. I really, you come, you sit down, and you're like, hey, I really feel like maybe God's calling me to pastor these people, to do something like this, but I don't know what to do. And like, oh, hey, so we start praying about it. Like, God might be calling you to do something, and that's great. And so as your church, we're behind you, and man, there's confirmation that, man, God really does seem to have his hand. Well, we might tell you like, hey, Kyle, we'll help you get started with this, but like, we're not going to pay your salary, because you can go work. Like, you can go up and get a job and do this. Now, you might need some startup money to help with the church and getting a little nook, something like that. That there's some practical needs. We don't hire everybody that wants to do ministry. We just support people doing ministry. And then there's a unique situation like that where maybe they need some finances to help with that mission that God's calling them to. When you get to somebody like Kenny and Nikki, they're going to a foreign country that they can't work in. So it's like, hey, they come and they're like, hey, God's calling me to go and do this thing. And he's put this on my heart. And there's confirmation. And this is what he's doing. And can you guys pray for me? And we're praying like, yeah, let's do this. We're behind you. Like, God has called you to go do this. And so because you can't go work, because you're in a foreign country, then, as the church, we're going to come behind you in that ministry, and we're going to help take care of your needs so that you can do that mission. Your mission's no different than Derek's in Monroe. The only difference is Derek can work a job and do his mission. Kenny can't do a job and do his mission. And then there are times like in Kyle's situation, if he were to go start a church, it's like, I don't have enough time to work and do this thing at the same time. It's like, I'm a missionary in my area. And guess what? And I'm fully funded. Why? Because there's a group of people at Calvary 316 that would like me to spend all of my time pastoring Calvary 316 and not the extra 15 hours I might have after a 40-hour work week. And then the time I also need to spend with family and kids. I'm blessed because the needs of our church necessitate paying a guy to do it. That's where we get into it. Like, that's a little different. A missionary is a little different, but the calling is all the same. It's something that God puts on your heart. And when you keep it localized to a church, that's where I think you safeguard from there being that us and them idea. Mm-hmm. And I think the big M missionary organizations just naturally come in and create that distinction, as opposed to like local churches should send missionaries, as opposed to missions organizations sending missionaries. I just think that that's a more organic. We see that idea presented to us in the scriptures. Mm-hmm. Again, I don't think Paul would have ever considered himself a missionary as we think of missionaries, or any of those guys. Like, Paul was just starting churches.
They were just doing what they were doing. Like,
God called him to go someplace. Like, they're in Antioch, and Paul's like, I feel like God's calling us to go, and they go.
He refers to himself as a bondservant all the time.
Yeah, he's just a slave.
Yeah,
going where the master tells him. Yeah.
The Bible also talks about the churches. The places that they went were supporting them.
Yes, for sure.
And there were times that he had to work too. I mean, he
built tents.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's why we call it the tent making skill, because Paul made tents.
Yeah. But the churches that he went to were supporting him. And then when that wasn't happening, he found something else to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a time where the churches are like, yeah, Jerusalem is really getting hammered with this famine and all this. And they start raising money to send back with Paul, to help those that were struggling. Like, but it wasn't like, again, the idea, going back to the original question, wrapping this up a little bit, like the idea of a missionary and the way that we have now like traditionally come to see a missionary, I don't think is a fully biblical notion. And I think it robs us of the idea of that we're all missionaries. Our missions end up looking different, need to be facilitated differently, and handled differently. That makes sense?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Any additional thoughts? And then we gotta go ahead and wrap it up here.
Just use your skills that God gave you.
I already talked too much. So.
No, absolutely. Kenny, thank you for being with us tonight.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Creighton, did we get to the gist of it?
Yes, I thought that was a great episode. I thought it was really, really good.
Anything online?
Let me double check. We do have some hellos from a Nick Adams. I'm not sure who that is.
Nick Adams. Okay, yeah.
Blake Beckham was early on in the show. He said, "Hold up, do I spy a Kenneth?" That was from Blake. Hi, Blake.
How's it going?
It's good to hear from you, man. And then Jennifer Abbott, one of our longtime listeners, told us good evening earlier. And a Miley Parkin said that she is winning the battle on Christmas and not to let Kyle fool us.
Good for you, Millie. Absolutely good for you. Creighton, thanks for being with me, brother.
Always a pleasure.
With all that being said, thank you so much for watching the live stream version of the Outlaw Radio Show. What are you looking at?
No show next week.
Oh, that's right. We have a new graphic that will be put up.
I was trying to be cool.
I got you. You're trying to be cool, and I'm like, what are you waving your arm for? Thanksgiving. We will not be meeting. We will not be meeting next week. Again, if you're watching the live, thanks for being with us. Don't tune in next week. If you're listening on the podcast, which is released on Thursday, hang out with us on the live stream, which is Wednesdays. With all that being said, my name is Zach Adams. Thank you so much for joining me. And these knuckleheads, we'll see you guys in 2 weeks. God bless.
See ya.